They sold my family's ranch without even asking me. But the fence I built, the one they tried to tear down, became the line that destroyed their empire. They thought they could steal land. They had no idea they were stepping into a war they'd never win. My name is Jack Miller, and I never thought the land my grandfather built with his own hands would be sold, without a single word to me. That line still burns in my mind like the branding iron he used on our cattle. The Miller Ranch had stood for nearly 80 years, weathering storms, droughts, and even bankruptcy scares, but never betrayal. At least not until the HOA came along. When I inherited the ranch, I knew things were going to be tough. My grandfather passed away, leaving me the last of his generation. No kids, no siblings, just me, the land, and his old cattle dog, Rusty. I moved back from the city, determined to restore the place. But what I didn't expect was that the neighboring subdivision, Willow Creek Estates, had expanded their reach. They called themselves a homeowners association. I called them a private government. And that's exactly what they acted like. The first day I got the letter, I thought it was a joke. Dear Mr. Miller, as a new property owner within the Willow Creek district boundary, please be advised of HOA oversight regulations. All fencing, livestock, and external structures require board approval. I laughed. My grandfather's ranch existed before Willow Creek even existed, before any of those neat little houses or picture-perfect lawns. The idea that they could oversee me was ridiculous. I threw the letter away, but they weren't kidding. Within 2 weeks, a white SUV rolled up the dirt road. A woman in a blazer stepped out, clipboard in hand, heels sinking into the mud. Her name was Karen Delaney, president of the Willow Creek HOA. Mr. Miller, she said, squinting at my barn like it offended her. We've had some concerns about your fencing line encroaching into HOA jurisdiction. I tilted my hat, leaning against the post. Ma'am, this fence has been right here since the 60s. My granddad built it himself. She smiled, that polite, fake kind of smile people give when they're about to screw you over. Well, she said sweetly, according to our updated district maps, this area now falls under Willow Creek's maintenance zone. Any changes or continued use require approval from the board. I looked her dead in the eye. Lady, this isn't your land. She looked back at me with that smug suburban confidence. It is now. On paper. That was the day I realized something was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started getting notices and fines letters and friendly reminders. They said my barn was a safety violation. My livestock was unauthorized. My fencing line crossed HOA managed terrain. Each notice came with a fine, $500, $1,000, $750, like they were daring me to fight back, and I did. I went down to the county office, old deed in hand. The clerk, an older man named Paul, took one look and whistled. Jack, your deed predates the Willow Creek Incorporation by 30 years. They can't touch this. That's what I thought too. But then he frowned, scrolling through the computer. Hold on. There's a new survey filed last month. Looks like the HOA petitioned for a boundary realignment. They used an updated zoning map and it went through the Board of Zoning Review. My jaw clenched. You mean they changed the borders without telling me? He nodded grimly. Looks that way. They can't sell it, though, not legally. But Karen didn't need to sell it legally. She just needed to make my life miserable until I gave up. Every week brought a new problem. One morning, a notice was taped to my barn. Condemned for unsafe structure. Another day, HOA hired landscapers came by and cut down part of my perimeter hedge, claiming it was overgrown onto community land. Rusty barked so much that week, I thought he'd lose his voice. The final straw came on a Friday morning. I was out fixing the northern fence line when I saw survey stakes, bright orange plastic markers, driven deep into my pasture. They stretched in a line that cut straight through the middle of my grazing field. I followed them until I reached a sign that made my blood run cold. Future site, Willow Creek expansion, community garden and recreational park. That's when I saw her, Karen, standing by a county truck with 2 men in safety vests. She waved like she was greeting an old friend. Good morning, Mr. Miller. Exciting news, we're expanding community access. I walked up to her, every step heavier than the last. You're building on my land. She adjusted her sunglasses. Actually, the land was recently reassigned through zoning review. The HOA board voted unanimously for public development. You'll receive notice soon. You mean you stole it? Mr. Miller, she said, stepping closer, lowering her voice. You don't have the influence you think you do. These kinds of things happen all the time. It's better to cooperate, otherwise you might find it difficult to keep this property operational. That was it. The moment that broke something inside me. That night I sat on the porch watching the horizon fade to black. The fence line glowed faintly under the moonlight, my grandfather's work, every post dug by hand. I remembered his voice. A man's fence ain't just wood and wire. It's his promise to protect what's his. They wanted to erase that promise, but I wasn't about to let that happen. So I started digging through every box in the attic, old maps, property tax ledgers, handwritten letters from the county clerk from the 1940s, anything that could prove that my land was mine. By midnight, I found something even better, a surveyor's blueprint with my grandfather's signature and the county seal. It clearly showed the boundaries and including the stolen pasture, the same pasture where Karen planned her park. I smiled for the first time in days. The next morning I called a friend, Tom Jacobs, a former construction foreman who owed me a favor. Tom, I said, how fast can you get a crew to build a fence? He chuckled. You already got one, don't you? Yeah, I said, but this one's not to keep cattle in. By the weekend, the sound of hammers echoed across the ranch. We built a new fence, a massive 12-foot-high wall of treated timber and steel mesh. It surrounded my stolen pasture like a fortress. Karen showed up again, furious. What is this, Mr. Miller? She shouted from her SUV window. I leaned against the gate, wiping sweat from my brow. It's called private property. You can't, according to county code, I interrupted, pulling out my grandfather's blueprint. This land is under my deed. And since you like paperwork so much, I suggest you double-check your zoning office before you start construction. She opened her mouth to argue, but I just walked away. She didn't know it yet. But the fence I built that week would be her downfall, because inside that fence, buried beneath the soil, was a truth she couldn't bury, and once it came out, she'd regret ever touching the Miller Ranch. When you fight people who hide behind rules, sometimes you have to beat them with their own rule book. That's what my grandfather used to say, and that was exactly what I planned to do. The morning after we finished building the fence, the HOA went ballistic. Karen called 3 times before sunrise, then left a voicemail dripping with fake concern. Mr. Miller, we've had several complaints from residents about your unauthorized structure. You're in violation of community appearance standards, and the board will be sending an inspector to review it. I just smiled. That was exactly what I wanted. By 10 a.m., a white pickup with the county seal rolled up my driveway. Out stepped Inspector Daniels, a tall man in his 50s with sunburned skin and a quiet stare. Karen's SUV followed close behind, and of course, she strutted out in her business heels, holding her binder like a weapon. Mr. Daniels, she began, this is the property I mentioned. He's erected a non-compliant fence without HOA review. Daniels cut her off politely. Ma'am, this fence is outside HOA jurisdiction. I'm here on a zoning boundary review. Karen blinked. Excuse me? No, this is within our development zone. He flipped open his folder. Not according to the Miller deed of 1946. Then he looked at me. Mr. Miller, may I see your copy? I handed him the original blueprint, the one with my grandfather's signature. He compared the two, then nodded slowly. This document predates any zoning or development permit in this area. By law, this ranch is an independent parcel. The HOA has no authority here. Karen's face drained of color. She stammered, That can't be right. The county approved our expansion. Daniels raised an eyebrow. Then someone at your office falsified documentation. That word, falsified, hit her like a gunshot. When they left, Karen didn't look at me. She just got into her SUV and slammed the door. But I saw the look on her face through the tinted glass, not anger, not fear, panic. That's when I knew. She'd gone too far. And I wasn't done yet. That night I called Paul, the clerk from the county office. Paul, I said, you told me they used a new zoning map. Can you check who submitted it? He hesitated. Jack, you know I could get in trouble for that. Please, I said quietly. This isn't just paperwork anymore. They're trying to erase my family's land. There was silence for a few seconds. Then he sighed. Give me a day. The next morning I drove into town. When I reached the county records office, Paul was waiting by the back door with a folder under his arm. He handed it to me without a word. Inside were scanned copies of the boundary adjustment forms. And right there on the signature line, Karen Delaney, HOA president. Below that, a forged county stamp. But something else caught my eye. A second signature. Evan McCall, a name I didn't recognize. Who's this? I asked. Paul glanced around nervously. He's a developer. Works with Horizon Realty. They've been buying land around Willow Creek for a new luxury project. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen hadn't just been power tripping. She'd been selling land she didn't own. My land. Looks like they plan to turn that pasture into a community park, Paul said quietly. Then flip it to Horizon for a private access deal. Big money. I gripped the folder so tightly it crinkled. They picked the wrong ranch. Over the next week, Karen tried everything to intimidate me. She sent code enforcers, trespass warnings, even tried to block my driveway with HOA security. But every time they showed up, I had paperwork ready, signed, sealed, and legal. Still, I needed proof she'd profited from the deal. That's when I decided to play her game. I went to one of her HOA meetings, uninvited. The community hall was full of well-dressed homeowners, sipping coffee and whispering behind clipboards. Karen sat at the front like a queen on her throne. When she saw me, she froze for a split second, then forced a smile. "Mr. Miller," she said sweetly, "this meeting is for HOA members only." I stepped forward, holding the folder Paul had given me. "Then you might want to hear this, since your name's all over it." Whispers rippled through the room. Karen stood abruptly. "Security!" I slapped the documents on the table. "This is your boundary adjustment petition, forged with a fake county seal. And here," I flipped to the last page, "is the developer agreement signed by you and a Mr. Evan McCall, promising him access to my land in exchange for a $75,000 community contribution." The room went dead silent. Karen's face turned white. That's confidential HOA. Business," she stammered. "You can't," I leaned in. "No, that's criminal business. You filed false zoning paperwork and took a bribe." Someone from the back whispered, "Is that true, Karen?" Her voice cracked. "No." "He's lying." I looked around the room. "Anyone here want to check with the county clerk? Or should I just call the sheriff myself?" Karen's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might break. That night I knew she was finished, but I also knew she wouldn't go down quietly. The next morning I found the gate to my ranch wide open. My cattle were scattered down the road and the fence we'd built was cut clean through. Rusty barked furiously as I ran down the hill. The posts were splintered, the wires snapped. Someone had rammed a vehicle straight through the new fence. I didn't need to guess who. The tire tracks led straight toward Willow Creek. I called the sheriff's office immediately. Deputy Sanders, and an old friend of my grandfather's, came out within the hour. When he saw the damage, his face hardened. "Jack," he said quietly, "this wasn't just vandalism. Looks like they used a heavy truck, maybe a work vehicle. I'll check nearby security cams." He crouched to pick up a shard of plastic. The logo was still visible. Willow Creek HOA Maintenance. I couldn't help but laugh, a low, bitter sound. They really don't learn, do they? 2 days later, the deputy called me back. "Jack, you might want to come down here," he said. When I arrived, he handed me a printed image from traffic camera footage. It showed a white pickup, HOA marked, crashing through my fence at night. The driver? Karen Delaney. She was caught red-handed. "Good news," Sanders said. "We've got enough to charge her with trespassing, destruction of property, and fraud once the county DA reviews the papers." But that wasn't the best part. The inspection Daniels had done earlier, it revealed something even Karen didn't know. Hidden beneath the old pasture, right under the soil she tried to claim, was an abandoned irrigation system built in the 1930s by the county agriculture department. That meant the land was historically registered under state protection. In other words, she hadn't just stolen my ranch. She'd tried to sell protected state property. When the sheriff's office served her the warrant, I was fixing the fence again. I watched from the porch as 2 squad cars rolled up to her house across the road. Her husband stood outside shouting. She came out in handcuffs, still wearing her HOA badge like it could save her. For a long time, I didn't move. Part of me wanted to feel triumphant, to celebrate. But another part of me just felt tired. This land had survived 3 generations. It didn't deserve this fight. My grandfather didn't build fences to keep enemies out. He built them to keep honor in, so I rebuilt the fence one last time, stronger, higher, with my grandfather's initials carved into the corner post. That night, I sat on the porch again, Rusty at my feet. The wind was calm. The air was still, and for the first time in months, the ranch felt like it belonged to me again. But the story wasn't over yet. Because the developer, Evan McCall, wasn't finished, and his revenge would be worse than Karen's. You can take a man's peace, you can even take his land. But when you try to take his name, that's when you start a war. 2 weeks after Karen's arrest, peace seemed to settle over the ranch. The morning sun rose quietly over the valley, the grass swaying like nothing had ever happened. Rusty chased birds along the fence line while I repaired a section of wire near the creek. For a while, it almost felt normal again, until a black SUV rolled up my driveway. 3 men in tailored suits stepped out, one of them holding a thick envelope. Their shoes crunched against the gravel like thunder before a storm. "Mr. Jack Miller?" the lead man asked. "That's me," I said slowly. He handed me the envelope. "You've been served. McCall Development LLC vs. Jack Miller. We'll see you in court." Then they left, just like that. I stood there in silence, staring at the letter. My gut already knew what it said, but reading it still made my chest tighten. Plaintiff claims rightful ownership of Parcel 17B, formerly known as Willow Creek Expansion Site, on the grounds of property encroachment, obstruction of development, and unlawful boundary modification. In plain English, they were suing me for building my own fence on my own land. They wanted $1 million in damages. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, deeds, and old maps. The light from the lamp flickered across the table. Rusty lay by the door, sensing something was wrong. I wasn't scared, not exactly. But I was furious. Karen was gone, but her partner, the developer, Evan McCall, was cleaning up her mess by trying to destroy me through the courts. And he had money. Lots of it. I didn't. I called the only lawyer I could afford, Rachel Kim, a local attorney who'd helped my grandfather years ago. She was sharp, fearless, and had a reputation for taking impossible cases. When she arrived, she walked straight to the table, scanning the lawsuit papers. "Typical developer move," she muttered. "They know they can't win legally, so they bury you under paperwork until you can't breathe." "Can we fight it?" I asked. She looked at me and calm, steady. "We can, but it'll be rough. He's got a team of corporate lawyers. You've got me and an old ranch." I smiled faintly. "That's all I need." For the next few weeks, my ranch turned into a war zone, not of bullets but of legal filings. Every day another envelope came. Another motion, another accusation. They claimed my fence damaged community, expansion potential. They said my grandfather's deed was outdated. They even accused me of fraudulently modifying survey markers. Each accusation felt like a slap in the face, but Rachel fought them all. One night, she called me from her office. "Jack, I found something strange in their paperwork." "What is it?" "There's a clause in McCall's original development proposal, one that mentions compensated cooperation from HOA officials." I frowned. "You mean a bribe?" She hesitated. "It doesn't say that word, but it's close. If we can link McCall to Karen's fraud, we can shut him down." "How?" "We find the money trail." That was easier said than done. McCall was slick. He'd buried his tracks under shell companies and legal jargon. So I decided to get creative. One evening, I drove into town and parked across from Horizon Realty's local office, McCall's company. Through the window I saw him, polished suit, perfect hair, laughing with 2 men at his desk. I waited until he left. Then I walked into the small diner across the street. The waitress there, Adelina, was an old friend of mine from high school. She used to work for Horizon Realty until last year. "Jack Miller," she said, pouring me coffee. "Haven't seen you in forever. What brings you to town?" "Same as always," I said quietly. "Trouble," she raised an eyebrow. "McCall?" I nodded. "You worked for him, right?" "Yeah," she said. "Didn't stay long. That man's all snakeskin and lies. Paid HOA folks under the table to push land sales. Everyone knew. My eyes narrowed. You mean Karen? Lena leaned closer. Karen and a few others. He called them his community partners. Paid them in cash or in favors like landscaping contracts, renovation jobs, even vacation grants. Do you have proof? She bit her lip. Not on me. But I know where he kept the records. A private file server in the back office. I helped set it up. That was the first real lead we had. The next morning, I told Rachel everything. She wasn't thrilled. Jack, we can't just break in and look around. We need a warrant. Then get one, I said. She nodded. I'll try. If we can convince the DA that McCall's tied to Karen's fraud case, he might greenlight it. It took a week of calls, meetings, and paperwork. But she did it. When the warrant came through, the sheriff's office raided Horizon Realty's office at dawn. McCall wasn't there, but his files were. Among the documents they seized was a spreadsheet labeled RCE compensation schedule. It listed payments, small, steady amounts made to multiple HOA members. And at the top of the list, Karen Delaney, $75,000. The evidence was undeniable. The following week in court, McCall sat across from me, his lawyer smirking like they'd already won. The judge entered, the room quieted, and Rachel began. Your Honor, the plaintiff claims property ownership through a boundary adjustment made in cooperation with the Willow Creek HOA. However, we have evidence that said adjustment was based on fraudulent signatures and bribery, orchestrated by the plaintiff himself. McCall's lawyer jumped up. Objection, hearsay. Rachel smiled faintly. Overruled? Because the county sheriff's office confirmed the spreadsheet this morning. The judge adjusted his glasses. You have this evidence? Rachel handed over the file. Yes, Your Honor. Along with the original deed, when proving the land has been in the Miller family since 1946. McCall's confident smirk began to fade. The judge read silently for a moment, then looked up. Mr. McCall, do you have any explanation for these transactions? McCall cleared his throat. Those were community investments. The judge's eyes narrowed. Community investments paid in cash to an HOA president who's now under indictment? No answer. Silence filled the courtroom. That's when Rachel delivered the final blow. Your Honor, under Section 412 of the State Land Act, any development project initiated through fraudulent boundary filings is voided in full. The Miller Ranch remains independent property. The judge nodded. Motion granted. Case dismissed. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. McCall stood there, his face red with fury. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you've won, Miller, but I'll find another way. I met his eyes. Then I'll build another fence. That night I sat outside again under the stars, the old wood creaking beneath me. Rusty lay by my feet, tired but peaceful. For the first time, I felt proud, and not just because I'd won, but because I'd done it my grandfather's way. Honest, patient, firm. The wind moved through the fence line, whistling softly, almost like a whisper, and I could have sworn I heard his voice again. You protected it, boy. That's what matters. But I didn't know then that McCall's defeat had triggered something bigger, because within days, state investigators began digging deeper, not just into McCall, but into every land deal he'd touched, and what they found would turn my little ranch war into a statewide scandal. Sometimes justice moves slow, but when it finally comes, it hits like thunder. The sun hadn't even cleared the ridge when I heard the engines, not the sound of trucks or ranch vehicles. Deeper, heavier. Government. Rusty barked, tail stiff, as two black SUVs and a white van rolled down the gravel road toward the ranch. Dust rose in thick waves behind them. The lead SUV stopped by the barn, and out stepped two men in dark suits, badges flashing in the morning light. Mr. Jack Miller? The taller one asked. I nodded cautiously. That's me. He flipped open his ID. Special Agent Carter, FBI. Behind him, a woman stepped out of the second SUV. Crisp blazer, sharp eyes, calm voice. Agent Rivera. I felt my heart kick up. FBI, what's this about? Carter gave a small smile. Relax, Mr. Miller. We're not here to arrest you. We're here because of what you uncovered. They followed me up to the porch, notebooks in hand. Rivera spoke first. The documents your attorney submitted to the county court, the ones linking Horizon Realty to fraudulent HOA transactions, they've opened a much bigger case. How big? I asked. Carter leaned forward. Big enough that we've traced similar land schemes across 3 counties. McCall wasn't just working with Karen Delaney. He had a whole network of HOA presidents falsifying boundary lines, flipping parcels and selling them to Horizon under inflated prices. I sat back, stunned. You're saying this wasn't just about my ranch? Rivera shook her head. No. Yours was just the one they couldn't hide. That fence you built marked a border they couldn't erase. It forced every document, every fraud, every lie, into the open. She smiled faintly. You drew a line they couldn't cross. Over the next hour, they explained everything. The FBI had already arrested Karen Delaney's husband. Turns out he was laundering money through community maintenance accounts. Another HOA president in a nearby town had flipped a wildlife reserve. And McCall? He was under federal investigation for racketeering and land fraud. But what surprised me most was when Carter slid a folder across the table. This is for you, he said. Inside was a federal recognition letter from the Department of Agriculture, officially designating Miller Ranch as a heritage agricultural site. Rivera added, Your family's land is now permanently protected from development. No one, not even the county, can alter its boundaries again. For the first time in years, my hands trembled, not from anger but from relief. My grandfather's land was safe, forever. But the story didn't end there. The agents asked if I'd testify, to help bring down McCall's entire operation. I said yes. The courtroom this time was packed. Reporters, neighbors, even old HOA members who'd once sided with Karen. The air was electric with tension. McCall sat at the defense table in his expensive suit, but this time he didn't look confident. He looked tired, cornered. When they called my name, I stood up and walked to the stand. Every step echoed like thunder in my chest. The prosecutor smiled reassuringly. Mr. Miller, can you tell the court what happened to your property? I took a breath. My name is Jack Miller. My grandfather built that ranch with his own 2 hands in 1946. For 80 years it stood free. Then one day, people with money and fake authority decided it was theirs. They used paper, signatures, and lies, but it was still theft. And when I built a fence to protect what was mine, they called it illegal. Turns out that fence was the only honest thing in the whole story. The courtroom stayed silent. Even McCall didn't look up. I continued. That fence didn't just protect my land, it exposed theirs. And I'd build it again 100 times if I had to. After I stepped down, the prosecutor revealed everything. The forged zoning maps, the bribes, the fake HOA accounts, the offshore wire transfers. It was a mountain of evidence. When the verdict came, the judge's voice was steady. The court finds the defendant, Evan McCall, guilty on all counts, including conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. McCall's face went pale. He'd be facing federal prison. Karen, too. Her plea deal had fallen through once they found her deleted emails. She'd tried to play victim, but the jury saw right through her. Justice at last had come home. A few months later, life on the ranch settled again. The land was quiet, free of court dates and letters and strangers in suits. Sometimes at sunset, I'd stand by the fence and look out over the pasture. The wood gleamed golden in the fading light, a monument to every fight, every scar, every victory. Rusty would nudge my leg, tail wagging, as if to remind me that peace wasn't something you found, it was something you earned. One evening, Rachel drove up in her old truck. She leaned against the porch post, smiling. You did it, she said softly. Your grandfather would be proud. I nodded. We did it. She chuckled. Funny thing, the county's talking about naming a stretch of road after you. Miller Ranch Way. I grinned. Hope they don't make me join an HOA for it. We both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes only after surviving hell. Later that night, after she left, I walked to the fence one last time. The stars. Stretched wide above the valley, the same sky my grandfather once worked beneath. I placed my hand on the wooden post, the one with his initials burned into it. J.M. 1946. The wood was rough, solid, alive with history, and I whispered, "It's done, Grandpa." We kept it. The wind moved softly through the fields, carrying the faintest echo like a voice from another time. Good work, boy. Epilogue, 6 months later. The story of the Miller Ranch made headlines. The FBI investigation led to 12 arrests, 5 counties reopening old HOA records, and Horizon Realty filing for bankruptcy. A new law passed soon after, the Miller Protection Act, requiring open review of HOA land dealings and property boundary changes. People started calling me the man who fenced out corruption. But I didn't see it that way. I was just a man protecting his home, the same way generations before me had done. The fence still stands today, taller than before, carved with the words, "Private property," and proud of it. And every time I look at it, I remember one thing my grandfather said the day he handed me the keys to the ranch. A man's land ain't measured by acres, Jack. It's measured by the courage it takes to defend it. Now I finally understand what he meant.